If you're in Seattle, and you need to buy or sell a home, we'll be right there for you. Because we're the realtors that you can trust. So go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
You're listening to The Ron and Don Show on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of the Ron and Don Show. And we are back live in the Les Schwab studio.
What is up, Ron and Don Nation?
Hey, coming up on the Ron and Don Show, let's talk about the UFO controversy. In fact, you and I used to live by, is it Area 51?
Well, we were like several hundred miles away in the same state, so there was a lot of UFOs in the air, if you will.
We grew up in New Mexico. My mom was married to a man that used to work in Area 51. So we're going to talk about that and the UFO quote-unquote controversy. Also, adding more years to your dog's life. Sometimes I want to add less years to my dog's life.
Your dog's great.
We're going to get to that here in just a moment. But just a few days ago, Ron, all across the land, there were things happening simultaneously, and I want to get your thoughts. No kings since 1776. They say that about 5 million people took to the streets. And at the same time, the President of the United States said, hey, you know what? The Army is 250 years old. Let's have a celebration. What'd you see? What's your take? What are your thoughts?
So the interesting thing to me, and I don't know if this is a political thing. I guess it delves into politics. Our current president seems to be a very impulsive person. He just responds to things in real time, even with like the tariffs. It was like, boom, we're going to do it. Let's just see what happens. Right. Like there's not a lot of, some people go, oh, he's playing four-dimensional chess. I don't see it that way. I think that stuff is just like, let's just do stuff. So I guess in 2017, Donald Trump was in Paris, France. And they had, I don't know if it was Bastille Day or
Bastille Day, yeah.
So they had a parade that featured some of the French military. And he absolutely loved this idea. Like the French are very flamboyant. It's a very good show. You're in this beautiful city. If you've been to Paris, like you can't have a bad view or a bad street in the first arrondissement, if you will, down there in the middle of Paris. And then after that, the Little Rocket Man had a parade where he was bringing out all the ICBMs in North Korea.
Kim Jong-un, yeah.
And so after that parade is when the nickname Little Rocket Man came about. But part of his brain was impressed with the pageantry and the fact that if you don't go and cheer your brains out, you get your brains blown out in North Korea. Yeah. So the choice is come to this parade and act like it's the Super Bowl times 100, or you're going to be put away in prison. So the crowds there are going crazy. In fairness to the North Koreans, their marching routines are pretty cool.
And they have ICBM rockets.
They do have ICBM. They do this thing where the soldiers will march one direction and then do a 180 and interweave between the lines. Like, it does look cool.
It's not different from what Hitler used to do when they would do their marches, their uniforms.
They have like a goose step sort of situation going on.
Yeah.
And so I think that he's just like, I want a parade. Mm-hmm. And people were like, not a good idea. And there's this famous quote by Harry Truman that's like, you're the big dog. I'm paraphrasing Harry Truman. When you're the big dog, you don't need to say you're the big dog. Mm-hmm. You're just the big dog. Yeah. Like the big dog doesn't do parades because everybody knows you're the big dog. And so I think it was a combo of just this impulsive thing along with it that it's his birthday and nobody is around him that will tell him no. Visually, it looked super underwhelming, at least from the television footage that I saw. You had squeaky tanks that were 40 years old, because the military is not going to bring the tanks that are ready to be on the cutting edge.
Because the M1A1 tanks now have super armor on them. In fact, when we send tanks over to Ukraine, they're the old tanks, and we actually strip them of all their technology and the armor because we know that they're going to get in the hands of the Russians.
And then you have the guys...
To your point, we get the old stuff. You saw old Sherman tanks out there.
The drone operators holding the drone like they're carrying a pizza.
Yeah.
The robot dogs. Like, it's just...
No one's marching. Everyone's waving.
No one's cheering.
It's a rather friendly parade.
Like everyone on the parade stand is yawning. Marco Rubio couldn't stay awake. Melania wouldn't hold his hand. Like it visually, it was super underwhelming. The 5 million people that showed up nationwide in protest was visually more pleased from a TV standpoint. And you get the drone shots and you're like, this is downtown Dallas and it's packed. This is downtown LA, it's packed. Like Seattle. I was actually going to a graduation at the UW on Saturday. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to take the train because there's going to be 50,000 people at this graduation. Yeah. And so I went down to Westlake and got on the train. That was the most people I've ever seen on a sounder. It felt like you were in Tokyo trying to squeeze onto a train. And then everybody got off on Capitol Hill exit. So, I mean, I've heard estimates of 70,000 people in Seattle. That's a very large crowd. I've seen numbers of the Washington on the official parade route. So not counting like just people milling around the mall, but on the official parade route, I've seen numbers under 9,000, like the official count of 8,000 and change there. And so, and I think it's also a bad look to have the Marines marching in Washington, D.C. while you're using Marines to detain people.
Is it also
LA.
because like when I was in D.C., almost everyone that lives in D.C., works in D.C., a lot of people in D.C. have been fired by this administration, and the administration doesn't love the people of D.C., and D.C. doesn't love the administration. You saw that. I saw the Harris rally when I was there. There were 70,000 people at the Harris rally, and yet where I stayed at the Mayflower is empty. And it's because it was all the people from D.C. that came to her rally. So it's D.C. really leans to the left for sure. So that may have been.
In certain parts, I think that's true.
That may have been.
How did it land for you?
I wrote about it, so I'm just going to read it. And if you want to check out what I wrote, just go to my Facebook page. I wrote, really? No king since 1776? It's by Don O'Neill. It's so great seeing all the dads out with their kids on Father's Day. In fact, I have a picture of my son and I riding bikes. It places me in a place of gratefulness and also a reflective mood. And I've always had good chats with my boy when we go on adventures. So I recently asked my son why none of the kids at his school wear leather jackets. It blows my mind. He told me it's because, quote, Dad, we know who we are, we know what we can do, and we don't need to flex like your generation. Well, this generation, I saw a lot of flexing. In fact, it was our generation, Ron, that I saw flexing. I witnessed some amazing parades, marches, protests. On the left, we saw people take to the streets, proclaiming no king since 1776. And on the right, we had a military parade that was sparsely attended to the joy of those not in support of our current administration. So, no kings since 1776. You sure? What do you call a man who promised he would serve one term? During that term, he became cognitively impaired. He disappeared from the nightly news, and then he decided, well, he was fit enough to run for office again. And so he did. He ran for office. Then the American people, we were stuck with one candidate who he chose after his pick lost. So he ends up departing the White House. He pardons his whole family, including his son, who should probably be in federal prison. And then it's that same son who is on the team, running the country, trying to keep his dad in power. CNN Jake's Tapper said he couldn't write his book about the president's issues because no one on the left would talk to him. But now, after his demise, 250 sources from the left, many from his own administration, they have come forward. None have taken responsibility, including his son, his wife, his vice president. So no kings? We had another president tell us he did not have sex with that woman as he pointed his finger. He was impeached for it. He destroyed her life. And also, I wonder what his wife thought about that. And his approval ratings, though, went up, and he actually became wildly popular. And another sent thousands of Americans to die in a war, a 20-year war, where there were no weapons of mass destruction. Billions spent, families destroyed, PTSD, rampant military suicides, they were left in the wake. And his approval rating shot to almost 90% when he pulled the trigger. Neither of those men have ever authentically apologized to the American people or to those military families. So no kings? What about all these men now? They charge $500,000 to $1 million to give a 30-second talk. They all enrich themselves when they leave office. Have you seen the real estate they own? The security details that we still pay for? And even free flights for the left and the right to Epstein's Island. But no kings. And to throw it back for a minute, we once had a president ask us all what we would do for our country while he was sending his wife and kids away for a weekend, lots of weekends, so he could have relations with his young secretaries in the White House basement pool. Camelot was a farce, but we love that story. But no kings. Tim McGraw sings a song called Always Be Humble and Kind. The second verse says this: hold the door, say please, say thank you. Don't steal. Don't cheat. Don't lie. I know you got mountains to climb, but always stay humble and kind. Now we have a president that does all those things. He cheats, he lies, and he certainly lacks humility. And we love it. Or we hate it. Or we deny it. Because maybe we voted for him. Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, they emulated that song. When Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, he knew he was unelectable. And when Jimmy Carter wore a sweater and tried to be a steady hand in unprecedented times during the recession, well, we kicked those noble men out of office because you know what? They were not kings. Gerald disappeared and Jimmy Carter returned to his peanut farm. As I was thinking about all the dads out there this past Father's Day, I thought of those young men who were in D.C. driving those M1A1 tanks and flying those Black Hawk helicopters. They didn't get to go on a bike ride today like I did with my kid. They were just following orders. And many on social media laughed and made fun of the spectacle. But when they're asked to fight on our behalf, we expect it because for 250 years, damn it, they've done it. They take orders. They put their asses on the line. They get paid nothing. They move constantly. They suffer PTSD. They go through a divorce. They experience traumatic brain injuries, and 22 of them die every day from suicide. All this while serving at hundreds of bases all over the world, keeping us free tonight. And again, if you didn't like it, they were just following orders. Could that money be better spent on vets benefits, a better VA, and better pay for the Marines, the airmen, the sailors, the coasties, and the Air Force? You're damn right. Do we have a current leader that has never been hungry or dug a ditch or stocked a grocery store shelf while going to school and taking care of 3 kids at night? Yeah, you're damn right. Has he always known power and privilege because it was handed down to him by his father? Well, just look at the gold-plated office he's in. That's a king. And to know the dangers of power and privilege without a plan. Well, at least during this economic hardship, he did get his plane. Am I tired of the chaos created by chasing immigrants through schools, farmers' fields, and churches while his administration flexes every day on TV? Those same immigrants are the backbone of America. You don't like the Mexican flag? Well, I fly a flag from Ireland at my house. You aren't proud of your heritage? Well, it's all been a good TV show, hasn't it? And this current administration, they know good TV. But he's not the first king, and he won't be the last if we don't examine our hearts and the way that we treat each other. We all want to see the other side fail so badly. We saw that in the bloodshed of elected officials in Minnesota this weekend. I'm glad to see the left, they finally found their American flag. I haven't seen one in my neighborhood for a decade, but drive through Ellensburg and you'll see one on every house. And it's because most of the homes represent a son, a daughter, a mother, a father that have laid it all on the line for you and me. And most of those towns are on the right. But they fight for all of us. Don't laugh at the empty stands and the sounds of clicking tank tracks on the streets of D.C. I was proud of each and every one of those service members. We can march and protest and still honor those men and women that lay it all on the line every day. And by the way, I only know one king, at least I've read about. He's a liar, a lunatic, or exactly who he said he was, and he hung on a cross 2,000 years ago. He didn't have a gold-plated office, a security detail, or 5 planes. He didn't sell watches, crypto, or the Bible with his name on it. And his speeches were free. He didn't own real estate, a mansion, or have a castle with a moat. He was always humble. He was kind. And like my son, he never owned a leather jacket. The flag belongs to all of us. But so does the responsibility of who we decide will lead this country. Like my son said, don't we know who we are as Americans and what we can do? And like the kids at Lincoln High School in Seattle, Washington, hey, America, as Ron just said, we don't need to flex. It's time for chaos to return to kindness. It's time to remember that our kids are listening. No, they aren't listening. They are watching. Happy Dad's Day to all the dads, especially those away serving. Love and respect. Don of the Ron and Don. See you on the other side of this.
If you find yourself dreaming about a new home, go from just a dream to the Dream Team. Schedule your time at ronanddonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don Show. As you know, Ron and I are in real estate, and part of being in real estate is we get to drive around a lot.
Yes.
And I was driving around this morning. In fact, Ron and I have a listing over in Bellevue right now. We have one coming on in Edmonds. We have one on Queen Anne. I think we have 9 or 10 more listings coming on this summer. And in fact, on Friday's show, we're going to tell you about 3 of those homes, 3 brand new listings. So make sure that you're listening. And don't forget, because we talk to everybody all over the sound, we sell the sound. Ron and I grew up in a place in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. And how would you describe the Air Force Base there and the impact that it has, not only on Albuquerque, but also in New Mexico? Maybe talk a little bit about White Sands Missile Range and the history of the scientists there, the Air Force, and then we're going to talk about, growing up there, I think we always kind of saw UFOs, and there's some new information out today that maybe the government was making up some stories, and those stories, I think, are things that probably growing up there we always knew. We always kind of knew what was going on. Right?
Well, I mean, and I really didn't have a good understanding of this until recently. This kind of goes back to Robert Oppenheimer.
It does.
And if you see the movie Oppenheimer, he and his brother loved the high desert of New Mexico. And so when it came time for the government, when they went to him and said, hey, we need a nuke, we need this nuclear program, where should we do it? And he was like, I know just the place.
Because he loves to ride horses.
He loves to ride horses. He's like, it's kind of the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of space for us to do these. It'll be pretty private. So Oppenheimer's like, we're going to do north of Santa Fe. We're going to build this little village and bring in everybody. It'll be secure. It'll be top secret. And we will at Los Alamos. They'll do that. And so that was the first domino to fall. And then all of the brain power was, there was a time when you and I were growing up that Los Alamos, New Mexico was the most highly educated city in the world. Mm-hmm. If you took the median education of the entire population, there were more PhDs per capita in Los Alamos than anywhere on the planet. I don't think that's still true today. It might be, but I don't know if it's still true today. And these guys were mathematicians and scientists working on weaponry. And then you had Kirkland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, outside of Albuquerque, where they then said, hey, we're going to build all these warheads. We need a place to store them. So they started digging out a big storage facility under a mountain.
Man's on a mountain.
And then they needed a place to test these things. And so they went down to around White Sands Missile Range to test these things, because at the time, there was nothing around there. So a lot of those tests that we saw happened in New Mexico. I would like to split screen that there were many tribes of proud Native Americans that it was like, this is not the middle of nowhere. This is our home.
Great point.
This is where we've lived for generations.
Especially the Navajo.
The Apache, the Hopi.
Right.
Very proud traditions and cultures that were around for thousands of years before people said, there's nothing here. Let's blow it up.
Thanks for the reminder.
And so that was always something that was astonishing. There's a book I read, and I can find the title for you, of a guy who the U.S. military came in New Mexico and said, yeah, you guys, we know you've lived here forever. You need to get out because we're going to blow this up. We're taking all this land. And he's like, what do you mean? So that happens as a child, when he's a teenager. He then chooses to serve as a Navajo code talker in the Marine Corps, even though the U.S. military had taken away his family heritage. And then basically we win the war in large part because the Nazis could not decode the Navajo code talk. It's a fascinating book of like the dichotomy between I'm proud of where I live. The U.S. has pushed me out of my homeland, but I want to side on the side of America in this fight for freedom. It's a really, really interesting book. That's sort of a different story for a different day. And I could look up the book here in a minute.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show. So I guess my point is to bring this forward to what you're talking about. Because of this military infrastructure, then all of the high weaponry started to be developed there at the time. So we're talking 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe into the 80s. So when you had like the stealth bomber, that'd be developed and kept secret in New Mexico.
And flown at
when
night.
you had lots of experimental aircraft, all the stuff. And so Albuquerque started to grow, Santa Fe started to grow, Los Alamos started to grow. So they said, well, we need to go south. And so they went down by Las Cruces, which at the time had nobody there.
And down by Roswell.
Except for the native peoples.
Yeah.
And then they made Area 51.
Yeah. So
it's a long way to explain a short.
Well, it's kind of interesting because even when you go to Albuquerque, they have the largest balloon fiesta there, and a lot of balloon technology that even the Chinese use now. We have certainly used balloon technology, but of course those are only weather balloons. A lot of that was created there. In fact, some of the scientists after World War II, we scooped up from Germany because we were afraid that Russia was going to do the same thing, which they did, and we brought them here. And I shared before that my mom was
full-blown Nazis.
My mom was a secretary, and I had a chance to interview one of those scientists that worked on not only the Manhattan Project, but also other atomic projects as well.
Many of the rocket scientists were full-blown members of the Nazi Party.
Yeah, and we knew, I remember the first time that they showed a stealth plane coming out of a hangar. That was down in Albuquerque, but they had been flying stealth technology for almost 20 years. And what was interesting is when my mom would go to Kirkland Air Force Base, because that's where she worked, and also her husband did, she would pull up in her Honda Accord. They would open up all the doors. They'd bring out the dogs. They'd open up the trunk. She would have to leave everything there. Later on, she would leave her cell phone, but then where there were no cell phones, purses, everything had to be left there.
Mirrors underneath the whole deal.
And then she would go into a secured facility, and we wouldn't hear from her all day. She couldn't call there, and of course there's no text messaging or any of that. And then sometimes they'd have Kirkland days. Did you ever go to Kirkland days? We'd go there, and even all it, because Kirkland is attached to something called Sandia National Laboratories. And Sandia National Laboratories, these are the scientists that would create things with technology, but then it was the Air Force a lot of times that would go out and test these things. Or even the atomic bombs that were built in New Mexico, they were taken to Albuquerque, placed on trucks, and then they were driven to San Francisco, and then they were placed on the ship that ultimately would take those over. And then when it wasn't zigzagging on its way back, it was sunk. And we talked about
our
that
whole
story
childhood.
before
We
as
were
well.
told we're the number 3 target from Moscow.
Yeah.
It was Washington D.C. was number 1. Number 2, I think, was NORAD was number 2
in Colorado Springs.
And then number 3 was Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah, and here in Washington, we were top 5 because we had a lot of missiles. And in fact, if you go out to Discovery Park today, you'll see a lot of the technology. Some of that technology is still there that was used during the Cold
Back
War.
in my day, we were the number 3 target.
Yeah. So what's really funny about Roswell in Area 51, all of a sudden when there was some kind of interest in that, they're like, wow, we can make money off of all this UFO stuff. And so people down there with a wink and a nod, when you talk, when you want to talk about seeing UFOs, of course we've seen UFOs. And in fact, that's what Area 51 and Roswell, around that area, that's what it's built upon. The United States government is finally coming out and saying, hey, you know all those things you've seen in the sky around Area 51 and maybe throughout New Mexico? those might be some stories that we actually planted about UFOs. But think about what a UFO is. A UFO is an unidentified flying object. And to you and I, that's what it was. We couldn't identify it, but it is clear that the government could identify these flying objects because they would typically fly and test all this technology at night. And then because of satellites, all this stuff would be either hidden underground or hidden in hangars during the day.
Yeah, it seems like these reports are basically saying we had weapons programs that we didn't want to be uncovered, and so we didn't stop the spread of the UFO thing. The interesting thing to me about conspiracy theories like aliens coming to the planet are it's always like, or Bigfoot, like something. Why would they stay hidden? If you've traveled hundreds of thousands of light years to get to Earth, you're going to show up and remain hidden, and like probe somebody and then go away in the middle of the night and not announce yourself.
If my name's Bigfoot though, and I have big feet, how big are your feet, Matt? I might stay hidden. We'll see you on the other side of this.
Ron and Don, from radio to real estate. When you're ready to grab a cup of coffee and sit down with the guys, go to ronanddonsitdown.com.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the Ron and Don show. As I was saying before, because Ron and I are in real estate, we do a lot of driving around the sound, and I typically take Charlie with me. One of the reasons is I like his company. Sometimes we're out there for hours, if not days, it seems like. You get stuck on a ferry somewhere. We're very grateful because everybody has listened to us all over the sound. They call us from all over the sound. So we're working on places right now from Orting all the way up to Edmonds, Camino Island. Of course, on the east side, we just had a listing come on in Newport Hills this morning. We're going to tell you about it on Friday's show. Of course, a lot of stuff here in Seattle, way out to Wenatchee. So Ron and I find ourselves driving everywhere, and I like to take Charlie along. And you have to admit, Charlie's a good boy.
I love Charlie. He's a good dog.
Yeah, and Ron is one of Charlie's favorite people for sure. And then when my son comes home, they have a special connection that I probably don't have with Charlie, because I'm the alpha in the house, and you kind of gotta remain the alpha, and I'm fine being the alpha. But those two, they're peas in a pod, as my mother used to like to say, for sure. What's interesting about his breed, and we ended up, or Santa Claus, because Santa Claus brought Charlie back in the day. This would be 7 years ago now. He's 7 years old, and he still runs around like a puppy. One of the reasons that we got a smaller dog, and I think he only weighs 27 pounds, his breed of doodle, which is a golden doodle, they weigh between 27, that's on the light side, usually up to 35. They say they live longer, and one of the reasons they live longer is because their skeletons are put together a bit better. And I won't go into the way that they breed in the F1 through the F6, and they're and whether the mom's the poodle or the dad's the poodle, and who's the golden, and how all that works. But we did some deep research on that before we got him, and we thought, you know what, we would love it if we had him on the other side of 10 years. Anything on the other side of 10 years, we'd feel like we won the lottery. And you've seen him at 7 years. He still has a lot of puppy in him, and when you take him on a trail run, he still kind of leaps down the trail. So he's a great athlete. Some new research out says because of AI, not only do we think we're going to find a way for our dogs to live longer, but as a result of that, they say that humans are next.
Well, they're trying to test out some theory. The thing that researchers like about dogs is that they're all the same species, but there's a ton of variety, from a Chihuahua to a Great Dane. And they say it's even probably more of a spread than you have between human beings. So they like the variety and being specific to one species. And they're trying out some new longevity treatments. There was one, I think it's called rapamycin, that was found on like Easter Island or something. It was scientists were over there, and they noticed something about this fungus or whatever, and they isolated it and created this thing. I think it's called rapamycin. And I've heard, God, what's the guy that I gave you his book on longevity. He's a sort of an internet bro in a way, but he does all the Dr. Peter Attia. Is it Dr. Peter Attia?
That's right.
And so he was all about this thing, and he's doing experiments with human beings. He skipped right past dogs.
Yeah.
And so they're doing these things with rapamycin, is trying to see if it will increase longevity. But the thrust of it is they're using the dog population to do, because people want their dogs to live longer. So they're voluntarily saying, hey, I'll be a part of this study. Let's give rapamycin to my dog and see if he lives longer. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing these longitudinal studies with tens of thousands of dogs to try out these techniques. And depending on how the research comes back in, they're saying, can we tweak this, or could we apply this to human beings and try to increase longevity? If you kind of want to skip to the punchline on some of it, Peter Attia does a lot of stuff on rapamycin specifically. I find it interesting, and at the same time, I feel like there's a little bit of a fool's gold sensation to breathlessly chasing longevity for longevity's sake. I think that, like, there's this guy that takes 1,300 pills a day or whatever and does all this stuff, and it's like, dude, you're not even living a life.
Goes to bed at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's like you read his daily regimen, and it's like, he's a multi-millionaire. It's like, that sounds like the most miserable, non-fun life. Everything is regimented down to the second. It's like, if that...
His motto is death is for suckers.
Right. So if that is what longevity means, that every second of my life is regimented to that degree, it doesn't seem worth it to me. Like, I want to go out and live life and experience things. But if you could put it into a rapamycin pill, and it's like, hey, this is going to do X, Y, and Z. I don't know all the medical stuff with it. That's interesting. But, like, just thumb twiddling and saying, okay, I'm going to take these pills and do this thing, and then I've got 9 regimens before breakfast, and then I'm going to do these things until lunch. It's like, oh my God, that seems horrible.
Everybody wants a pill, but you can already, for the most part, most of us, especially if you make it to 40 or 50, statistically, if you make it to 30 and you're in good health, you're probably going to make it to 80 in America if you make it to 30.
And then my last thing on the dogs that I always like to get out there, multiply your dog's age times 7. They keep trying to get this out, and people aren't. That is not how it works for dog age. So this was super interesting to me. They say your dog in its first calendar year, so first human year, at the end of that year, that dog is 31 years old, like human chronology. And then you can add stuff on the top of that. So they say, don't think of it as when they're 1, they're 7, and when they're 2, they're 14. Think of a 1-year-old dog as an adult human, and then you will add on the years after that. And I don't think it equals out to 7 per, but it's like that I think is a more accurate way to think about it, because a dog when they're 1 is kind of grown up.
Yeah, it's going back to what I was saying, the low-hanging fruit that a lot of times we're not doing ourselves. It's interesting. I'm getting ready to go back to my 40-year reunion, and you see people online.
They're not even using beef tallow.
Yeah, who are going to the 40-year reunion, and there's people that look like they did when they were in high school, and you recognize them. And then there's other people, and who knows, maybe I'm one of these folks, where you look at them and they look like my grandfather, and you're just like,
oh my God,
man.
Dude, you're speaking to the choir. I was at something where Nate Bargatze does a routine on this.
He does, yeah.
Where you're like, you're out somewhere, you're hanging out with someone that's 25, and you're like, hey, bro, who are all these old people?
Yeah. Get to bed on time, though. Decrease alcohol. Don't eat a lot of processed food. Take care of your anxiety. Go on vacation. Love the one you're with. And that'll give you some longevity. And don't go to Mariner games too often, because number one, when I go, they lose, and then I always end up eating the Seattle dogs outside the game. Not to. I could eat 12 of those. They're so
garlic
good.
Fries.
Hey, you guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ron and Don Show. We sure do appreciate it. Don't forget, we are your broadcasters. We are your friends, but also we're licensed brokers here in the great state of Washington. You know we sell the sound, so if you need help buying, selling, and specifically when you're selling, if you have a house that has deferred maintenance, you don't know what to do with, call us. Sometimes it's best to sell it to a builder. Sometimes it's best to sell it to a flipper. Most of the time, though, it's best to bring that home to market. And if you don't have the money even to fix that home and bring it to market, we have lots of great ideas. And if you're on the buy side, because Ron, we're going to talk about this on our Friday real estate show. It used to be the whole Puget Sound was a seller's market, but now we're seeing a shift into neutral and also a shift for buyers right now and sellers, right? We're seeing buyer's market, seller's market, and neutral market. It just depends upon the neighborhood and the part of the sound that
we'll go into that more on the real estate show.
Yeah. So ronanddonsitdown.com if you'd like to sit down with us. In fact, we'll be doing some sit downs tomorrow. We generally do our sit downs in the morning, and then Charlie and I'll come see you as long as you have a pup cup for him, because he really demands a good pup cup. If I pull in to get any kind of coffee now and he doesn't get a treat or a pup cup, he's a little pissed off.
He should be.
At this guy over here. All right, don't forget, if you need the Nation News, we have a buyer's playbook and a seller's playbook. Takes 20 minutes. It's an ebook. You sit down, you drink a cup of coffee, figure things out. And also, ronanddonsitdown.com, as I said, it has all the answers. So till next time, thanks for listening to the show and watching on YouTube. And Matt off the mic is saying, check us out on Spotify, right? You keep your head up and your shoulders back. And don't forget, you've been listening to the Ron and Don Show only on the Ron and Don Radio Network.
Well, that's it. Show's over. We'll see you next time on the Ron and Don Radio Network.